In the forgotten lands, where the wind howled mournful songs among the cold stones of a grey hill, stood the Gothic chapel of St. Cyprian, a skeleton of faith with broken stained-glass windows and raven nests. It was to this decaying refuge that Grandpa Elias, a man with calloused hands and eyes that had seen many springs and winters, brought his two orphaned grandsons, Leo and Tom. Expelled from the village by the cruel landlord who saw them as a burden, they found their last haven in the ruin. Moss covered the walls, the ceiling dripped on rainy days, and the cold was a constant enemy. But Elias, with the wisdom of the ancients and the promise made to his late wife, did not give up. With makeshift fires and the boys' help, who carried stones and firewood with the determination of small warriors, they transformed the uninhabitable into a home. In the center of the chapel, shrouded in centuries of dust and whispered legends, lay an imposing statue, known by the villagers as the Stone Angel, a winged, somber figure that they said brought bad luck to anyone who dared to touch it. But for Grandpa Elias, it was just another dirty stone to be cleaned, a challenge to be overcome in his journey of survival. Little did he know that beneath the crust of grime and the veil of oblivion rested a secret that entire kingdoms had sought in vain for ages. The wind that howled mournful songs on the grey hill was not the only lament echoing through the forgotten lands. In the village, news of the sale of the chapel of St. Cyprian spread like a chilling shiver, but not out of pity. It was scorn, disbelief, and a certain superstitious terror that colored the conversations. Who, in their right mind, would spend their last coins to own a stone skeleton, a cursed place where the Stone Angel watched over oblivion? The answer was Ilara, the widowed healer, whose wise hands had brought relief to many, but whose eyes now carried the shadow of a misunderstood decision. Ilara was not a woman of riches, but of ancient wisdom. Her remedies and teas were more valuable than gold to the sick, but Bishop Valerius's greed cared not for the health of the soul, only for the gleam of coins. He saw the Gothic chapel, with its broken stained-glass windows and raven nests, not as a place of faith, but as an encumbrance, a property that generated more grim legends than tithes. For centuries, the church had unsuccessfully tried to unravel the secrets of that place, or at least get rid of the statue the villagers called the Angel of Death, a symbol of bad luck that drove away the faithful. Ilara's offer, to spend every penny of her meager inheritance and life savings in exchange for the deed, was music to the bishop's ears. He did not hesitate. "It's yours, woman. May the heavens help you find peace among the dead," Valerius had said with a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes as he counted the coins, ignoring the weight of Ilara's sacrifice. She, in turn, felt a strange attraction to that place, a silent voice calling to her across the centuries. It wasn't death that drew her, but the life she felt pulsing beneath the crust of desolation. With a small bundle of belongings and the crumpled deed in her hands, Ilara climbed the hill. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and grey, and the chapel seemed more imposing, more somber, under that dying light. As she approached, the smell of smoke and the sound of children's voices surprised her. The door, once ajar to emptiness, now seemed guarded by a presence. Inside, the scene was one of improvised life. A fire crackled in the center, casting dancing shadows on the mossy walls. Grandpa Elias, with his calloused hands, mended a garment, while little Leo and Tom, his orphaned grandsons, stacked stones, transforming the ruin into a home. Ilara's heart tightened. She had bought a home, but was about to dispossess others. Elias looked up, surprised, and his tired eyes met hers. Tension hung in the air, thicker than the fire's smoke. "Good evening, Grandpa Elias," Ilara said, her voice soft but firm. "It seems we have a misunderstanding." Elias, recognizing the healer, slowly stood, the boys shrinking behind him. "Misunderstanding? This is our home, madam, the only one we have left." Ilara held out the deed. "I understand, but now this place, it's mine. I bought it from Bishop Valerius." A heavy silence fell over the chapel. The boys looked at Ilara with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Elias took the deed, his rough fingers brushing the parchment. His eyes scanned the lines, and the truth, cold and cruel, settled in. The bishop, in his infinite lack of scruples, had sold an already occupied refuge. "We can't go," Elias whispered, his voice choked. "We have nowhere to go." Ilara felt their pain, but her own decision weighed heavily. She had spent everything. This was her destiny, her last abode. Her eyes, however, did not linger on them for long. They were drawn like a magnet to the imposing figure in the center of the chapel, the stone angel. Covered in centuries of dust and cobwebs, it seemed to watch them with an ancestral stillness. Legend said it brought bad luck, but for Ilara there was something more, a silent promise, an invitation to uncover what dirt and time had hidden. She felt a tingling in her fingertips, an urgency to touch, to clean, to reveal. The tension of that encounter, the uncertainty of the future, all mingled with the statue's powerful allure. She knew that somehow that angel was the key to everything, and she was willing to pay any price to unravel its secret. The night advanced, dense and cold, but the fire in the center of the Gothic chapel of St. Cyprian bravely fought against the darkness, casting dancing shadows on the mossy walls. The tension hanging in the air, thicker than the smoke, was almost palpable. Ilara, the crumpled deed still in her hands, felt the weight of Grandpa Elias's gaze, the hopelessness in his tired eyes. Little Leo and Tom, huddled behind their grandfather, were like frightened pups, their lives hanging by a thread. She had spent everything, every penny of her meager inheritance and life savings, for that piece of ruin, but it was not in her nature to cast needy souls out into the uncertainty of the night. Compassion, a flame that never extinguished in her healer's heart, spoke louder than the cold logic of ownership. "I can't just send them away," Ilara said, her voice soft but firm, echoing in the broken vaults. "Not tonight. There's enough room. For now." Elias watched her, distrust still battling with a flicker of hope. The boys, with childhood's innate curiosity, peeked from behind their grandfather's legs, their eyes fixed on the strange woman who had arrived. "But this place is yours, madam," Elias murmured, his voice choked with gratitude and humiliation. We can help, in exchange for a roof, for a corner for the boys." Ilara nodded, a silent truce, forced by circumstances and humanity. But her gaze, even as she arranged a blanket for herself near the fire, was already fixed on the imposing figure in the center of the chapel, the stone angel. The attraction was a silent call, an urgency that pulsed in her veins. Sleep did not come for Ilara. As Elias and the boys finally succumbed to exhaustion, their soft snores filling the silence, the healer rose. She picked up an old cloth and a bucket of water that Elias had warmed for dinner. The statue called to her, and she could resist no longer. "What are you doing, madam?" Elias's hoarse voice startled her. He had woken, watching her from the corner, a glint of apprehension in his eyes. "Cleaning," she replied, without looking away from the angel. "There are centuries of dust and oblivion here." Elias visibly shivered. "The villagers say touching the angel brings bad luck, that it watches over the dead, and that its presence is an omen." The ancestral fear of the village seemed to manifest in his words. "Legends," Ilara dismissed, though she felt a shiver, not of fear but of an almost feverish anticipation. She knew there was something more, something that legends and time had obscured. She began to clean, first the massive wings, then the serene, somber face. The dirt was thick, encrusted, a crust of centuries of neglect and legends. But as the dark layer yielded, something strange began to emerge. The stone was not porous, not cold and rough like granite or marble. There was a subtle gleam, an unusual resistance to the friction of the cloth. Her fingers brushed a surface that seemed vitreous, yet incredibly solid. The cloth turned black, but the cleaned area did not reveal the grey stone she expected. Instead, a dark, almost translucent hue, with reflections that seemed to swallow the flickering firelight and return it in a strange, distorted way. She scrubbed harder, sweat trickling down her forehead. Elias, despite his initial apprehension, couldn't tear his gaze away. Curiosity began to overcome superstitious fear. "It's a strange stone," he commented, approaching cautiously. The boys now awake and watching in silence, their eyes wide. "I've never seen anything like it." Elara didn't respond, totally absorbed. She felt the texture beneath her fingers, smooth, cold, but with a density that defied the logic of common stone. It was as if light didn't reflect off it, but through it, in a deep and mysterious way. She cleaned a larger area on the angel's arm. The darkness seemed to deepen, but there were also spots where the firelight was captured and refracted into tiny explosions of color, as if stars were trapped inside the sculpture, twinkling in a private universe. The night wore on, and Elara worked tirelessly. The legends, the villagers' fear, the bishop's greed, all seemed insignificant before that silent revelation. That was not stone. It couldn't be. She needed more light, something stronger to scrape away the most stubborn crust. "Grandpa Elias," she called, her voice hoarse with fatigue and growing excitement. "I need a knife or something sharp, and more water, if you have it." Elias, still hesitant, took his old hunting knife, its handle smooth from much use. "What for, madam? Won't you damage the statue?" "No," Elara said, with a certainty that surprised her. "I won't. I need to see what's underneath." With the knife, she carefully began to scrape away the thickest layer of ingrained dirt and moss. The sound was different from what one would expect from stone. A metallic scrape, but without scratching the underlying surface. And then, a larger piece of the crust gave way, revealing a perfectly smooth, deep black surface that under the flickering firelight radiated a prismatic, almost ethereal glow. It was not the color of volcanic rock, nor the opacity of a common mineral. It was something alive, pulsing with an inner light, a secret guarded for ages. Elara felt her heart race. That was not dark stone. It was transparent, yet so dense it appeared opaque in the dim light. And the glow. She remembered ancient stories, whispered tales of hidden treasures, of stones worth kingdoms, but she never imagined she would see one. It's beautiful," Elias whispered, the knife forgotten in his hands. Fear had been replaced by reverent awe. The boys, Leo and Tom, approached, wide-eyed, fascinated by the spectacle of light and color emerging from the darkness. Elara couldn't speak. Her fingers trembled as she touched the clean surface, cold, hard, indestructible, and brilliant. The firelight danced upon it, and the statue seemed to absorb and re-emit the light in a spectacle of hidden colors, as if a rainbow were imprisoned within it. The stone was not grey nor black. It was a myriad of colors, all contained within a dark, deep transparency. She knew, deep in her soul she knew, that was not the stone angel. It was something much, much more. The tension was no longer about a home, but about the secret. A secret the church had sought for centuries, a secret that Bishop Valerius, in his blind greed, had sold to her for a few coins, a secret that was now revealed there in the center of the forgotten chapel. under the eyes of a healer and an old man and his grandsons. The wind outside howled, but now it seemed like a chorus of ancient voices celebrating a discovery that would change everything. Ilara looked at Elias, her eyes wide, her breath caught in her throat. "Grandpa Elias," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. This is not stone." The firelight revealed an unmistakable brilliance, a brilliance that could only belong to one thing, a diamond, a colossal, raw diamond, sculpted in the form of an angel. The angel of death was, in truth, the diamond angel, and its secret was finally exposed. The word diamond hung in the air, a whisper that seemed to absorb the very sound of the wind outside, the crackle of the fire. It was not merely a precious stone. It was the embodiment of a legendary treasure, a myth transformed into reality before their incredulous eyes. Ilara felt her throat dry, her heart beating like a frantic drum in her chest. The firelight, once a comfort, now seemed too dim, unable to contain the radiance emanating from the angel's newly revealed surface. It was as if the chapel's very darkness recoiled, ashamed before that magnificence. What was once a grim and frightening figure now pulsed with an inner life, a symphony of imprisoned lights that broke free with every flicker of the flame. It was not a superficial gleam, but a depth that seemed to swallow and re-emit light in a kaleidoscopic spectacle. Every facet, every curve of the sculpture seemed to have been designed to capture and refract the essence of light, transforming it into 1,000 hidden colors. Elias, the old hunter with tired eyes, was paralyzed. The hunting knife, once an extension of his hand, now hung inert. His ancestral fear of the angel of death had dissipated, replaced by an awe bordering on ecstasy and dread. He had lived a life of deprivation, of daily struggles for survival, and now, before him, was a fortune that defied all imagination. The boys, Leo and Tom, did not yet grasp the magnitude of the discovery, but their childlike eyes were fixed on the statue, fascinated by the play of lights, as if a piece of the starry sky had fallen into the chapel. This is impossible," Elias managed to whisper, his voice choked. "A diamond, that size." Ilara couldn't tear her gaze away. Her fingers, still trembling, brushed the cold, perfectly smooth surface. It was undeniable. The density, the hardness, the way the light behaved, everything screamed the truth. It was not just a diamond, it was a single sculpted block, a masterpiece of nature and perhaps of some ancient art. The church, in its millennia-long quest, was not looking for a common gemstone. They were looking for this. The stone angel was not a legend of bad luck, but a disguise, a camouflage for the most coveted treasure of all. Ilara's mind reeled. She had spent everything for a tomb, for a refuge for her last days, and now she was the guardian of a fortune that could buy kingdoms. The irony was cruel, the responsibility overwhelming. Bishop Valerius, in his blind greed, had sold what the church had sought for centuries, for a few coins, for a handful of gold that to him was just a small addition to his already vast wealth. He had disposed of an invaluable treasure, exchanging it for a pittance, and the healer, in her search for peace, had become the unwitting owner of a secret that would change the course of many lives. "The bishop," Ilara finally managed to say, her voice hoarse. "He doesn't know. He sold what the church sought most." Elias nodded slowly, understanding settling in his eyes. The fear, which had been driven away by awe, returned, but in a more insidious form. It was not the fear of a curse, but the fear of men, of the greed that stone would awaken. He had seen enough of human cruelty to know that such a secret could not be kept for long. "If he finds out," Elias continued, his voice low and grave, "he will come. And he won't come alone. The church. They will not hesitate to take back what they consider theirs, and we will just be obstacles. The reality of the situation hit Ilara with the force of a punch. It was no longer just about a home or about compassion for an old man and his grandsons. It was about survival. They were sitting on a ticking time bomb, and the ticking had already begun. The chapel, which should have been their refuge, had become a trap. "We need to cover it," Ilara said, urgency in her voice. "No one can know, not yet." With hasty hands, they began to gather the cloths and blankets they had, trying to hide the brilliance that stubbornly escaped. The dirt and moss Ilara had scraped away now seemed like a blessing, a perfect camouflage. They tried to recreate the illusion of the stone angel, but the image of the colossal, glittering raw diamond was already etched in their minds. The night wore on, but sleep was impossible. Ilara and Elias sat near the fire, the boys asleep in their blankets, oblivious to the weight of the secret hanging over them. The chapel's silence, once comforting, was now filled with the tension of an involuntary conspiracy. With every dancing shadow, every howl of the wind, they imagined footsteps, voices, the imminent arrival of those who would come to claim what was theirs. "What will we do, madam?" Elias asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "We can't stay here, not with this." Ilara looked at the covered angel, her mind racing for solutions. She had dreamed of a quiet retirement, of the peace of a tomb. Now she had a treasure that condemned her to uncertainty, to flight, perhaps even to death, but there was also a spark of something more. Power. Power to change their lives, to protect Elias and the boys, to perhaps finally find a true home, far from greed and oppression. Dawn began to peek through the cracks in the chapel's broken walls, painting the sky in shades of grey and rose. The new day brought no relief, but a fresh layer of urgency. The world was waking, and with it, the possibility that the secret would be discovered. Ilara knew the bishop, sooner or later, would realize his mistake. The church would not give up its treasure for long. They needed to act, and quickly. The diamond angel was a blessing and a curse, and their fate was now intrinsically linked to its perilous gleam. The grey light of dawn, creeping through the chapel's cracks, brought not the promise of a new beginning, but rather the shadow of an imminent threat. The air, once heavy with dampness and mold, now seemed thin, charged with the weight of the secret lying beneath the makeshift cloths. Ilara and Elias, sitting before the dying fire, exchanged no words. The silence was more eloquent than any shout, filled with the urgency of a decision that needed to be made before the sun fully rose, revealing the world outside and, with it, the dangers the discovery brought. Ilara's mind was a whirlwind. She, a healer who sought only a place to rest her bones, had become the guardian of a treasure that defied imagination. The Angel of Death, the feared and avoided figure for centuries, was in fact a colossal raw diamond. A marvel of nature and art, hidden beneath layers of dirt and superstition. The irony was brutal. Bishop Valerius, in his blind greed, had sold what the church had sought for centuries for a handful of coins, for a tomb he considered useless. And now, this tomb held the key to untold power and wealth. "We can't stay here." Elias finally broke the silence, his voice hoarse and low, as if he feared the very walls might hear. He looked at the shapeless mound beneath the cloths, where the diamond's brilliance still seemed to pulse, even hidden. The bishop, he's not a man to forget, and the church. They have eyes and ears everywhere. Ilara nodded, her eyes fixed on the dancing flames. She knew the nature of men, the insatiable thirst for power and wealth. The bishop, upon realizing his mistake, would not hesitate to use all his influence, all the church's power, to reclaim what he considered his. And they, an old healer, a retired hunter, and 2 orphaned boys, would be mere insects to be crushed in his path. "The problem," Ilara murmured, "is that we can't just leave, not with this." She gestured vaguely towards the angel. "It's colossal, Elias. It's not a jewel you keep in your pocket. It's the chapel itself that seems to have been built around it." Elias sighed, rubbing his tired face. "It's true. Moving something like this, it would be impossible for us. We'd need a team, tools, time. And time is what we don't have." He looked at the boys, Leo and Tom, who were still sleeping soundly, oblivious to the danger surrounding them. The responsibility of protecting them weighed on both their shoulders. "So we need to hide it better," Ilara concluded, her voice gaining new determination. "We need to make it look exactly as it was before. A dirty, forgotten stone angel. No one can suspect, not for a moment." The task was monumental. They had scraped away the dirt and moss with such effort, revealing the diamond's magnificence. Now they needed to reverse the process, but convincingly. Elias, with his hunter's experience, was practical. "We need dirt, moss, everything we scraped off, and maybe a little more. The rain and time will do the rest of the camouflage work, but we need a start." As day broke, the two began to work with a silent urgency. Elias left the chapel, scouring the surroundings for damp earth, dry leaves and moss. Ilara, inside, carefully spread the dirt she had saved, trying to recreate the millennia-old crust that covered the diamond. Every movement was calculated, every layer, an attempt to deceive the curious eyes that would inevitably come. As they worked, Ilara thought of Bishop Valerius. He was a cunning man, but his greed blinded him. He had underestimated the value of that crypt, that statue, but for how long? The church had records, legends. At some point, someone would connect the dots, someone would remember the stories of the Diamond Angel and the relentless search for it. And then, the bishop would be the first to be questioned. The pressure on him would be immense, and he, in turn, would exert pressure on anyone who might have information. "We need a plan, Ilara," Elias said, returning with his arms full of dirt and moss. "We can't live here with this. We can't run away with this. What will we do?" Ilara paused, wiping the dirt from her hands. "First, we need to buy time. Make it seem like nothing has changed. Then..." She looked at the chapel entrance, at the world outside beginning to awaken. "Then we need to think. The church won't give up its treasure, but maybe, just maybe, they don't know exactly what it is. Perhaps they're looking for a stone, not an entire angel." The idea was risky. Keeping the diamond secret meant living under constant threat, but revealing it meant handing it over, and with it, their freedom and perhaps their lives. Ilara felt a chill down her spine. She had sought peace and found a war, but it wasn't a war she would fight alone. She had Elias and the responsibility for the boys. "Let's finish covering it," Ilara said, her voice firm, "and then we'll act as if nothing happened. But we'll be ready, ready for whatever comes." They worked until the sun was high in the sky, sweaty and exhausted. The angel of death was once again covered, disguised, looking once more like the grim, forgotten figure that had frightened the village for generations. But for Ilara and Elias, the image of the raw diamond, pulsing with light and color, was etched in their minds. They knew the truth, and that truth was a heavy burden. The boys began to stir, slowly waking. Leo yawned, rubbing his eyes. "Grandma Ilara, what are you doing?" Ilara smiled, a tired but reassuring smile. "Just tidying up the house, my dear. We have a lot of work to do." She knew their work was just beginning. The chapel was now a temporary refuge, a hiding place, but the world outside was vast and dangerous, and the secret they guarded was a beacon that, sooner or later, would attract the hungry eyes of the church. They needed a plan, and they needed it now. Their lives depended on it. The morning light, which once seemed a threat, now seeped through the chapel's cracks, revealing dancing dust and the exhaustion on Ilara's and Elias's faces. The angel of death was once again hidden, a mountain of raw diamond disguised beneath layers of earth and moss, a convincing sham for inattentive eyes. But for them, the brilliance of the truth still pulsed beneath the camouflage, a secret too heavy to ignore. The boys, Leo and Tom, awoke with the innocence of youth, oblivious to the drama unfolding around them. Leo yawned, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Grandma Ilara, what are you doing?" The childlike voice, full of curiosity, cut the tension like a knife. Ilara forced a smile, an effort that cost her more than she wanted to admit. "Just tidying up the house, my dear. We have a lot of work to do." The phrase, spoken with forced lightness, was a lie for the boys, but a brutal truth for her and Elias. Their work was just beginning, and it was a work of dissimulation, of strategy, of survival. As the boys stretched and asked for food, Ilara and Elias exchanged burdened glances. The chapel, which had been a refuge, was now a hiding place, and the air inside it seemed thin, heavy with the need for a plan. They needed more than just food and water. They needed a strategy for the future, a future that had suddenly become uncertain and dangerous. The first task was the simplest, yet also the most crucial: maintaining normalcy. Elias went out to hunt as usual, taking the boys with him to teach them the ways of the forest, a routine that Ilara hoped would ward off any suspicion. Meanwhile, Ilara remained in the chapel, not only to prepare the little food they had, but to watch, to listen, to feel the pulse of the world outside. Bishop Valerius, she knew, was not a man to forget. Greed was a flame that burned eternally in his heart, and the thought of having sold an invaluable treasure for a pittance would surely torment him. The church, with its centuries of history and its legends of the Diamond Angel, would not take long to connect the dots. Someone, somewhere, would ask the right question, and then the hunt would begin. As she stirred a thin pot of soup, the thought of Valerius gnawed at her. He was a man of power, with tentacles that stretched throughout the village and beyond. He would not come alone. He would come with the authority of the church, with the strength of his guards, with the determination of one who seeks to reclaim what he considers his by divine right. And Ilara, an old healer, stood in his way. When Elias and the boys returned at dusk, the silence that followed dinner was heavy. The boys, tired from the hunt, soon fell asleep, leaving Ilara and Elias alone with the burden of the secret. "We can't stay here," Elias repeated, his voice a hoarse, almost inaudible whisper. He sat near the fire, sharpening a knife with methodical movements, his eyes fixed on the flames. "But we also can't leave. Where would we go? How would we take it?" Ilara looked at the shapeless mound beneath the cloths where the Diamond Angel rested. It was a cruel irony. She had bought the crypt to have a place of rest, a sanctuary. Now it was a prison, a target. "We need a plan, Elias," she said, her voice firm, despite the tremor in her hands. "A plan that buys us time, and a plan that gives us an escape." The idea of simply fleeing with the diamond was absurd. It was colossal, impossible to move without a team and equipment they didn't possess. Sell a piece? How? Who would buy a diamond of that size without asking questions? And revealing its existence meant handing it over to the church, and with it, their freedom. What if? What if we don't need to move it whole? Elias suggested, his voice hesitant. What if we could extract a part, small enough to be carried, large enough to change our lives? Ilara considered the idea. It was dangerous. Damaging the angel could diminish its value, or worse, alert the church that someone was trying to dismember it. But the alternative was to stay there, awaiting the bishop's inevitable arrival. "It's a huge risk," Ilara pondered, "but perhaps it's the only one we have. We'd need tools, and silence, and time. Time, always the enemy. With each passing day, the chance of Valerius discovering the truth increased. Rumors, whispers, Ilara's absence from the village, everything could raise suspicions. "The village," Ilara murmured. "We can't isolate ourselves completely. We need to go there, buy supplies, keep up appearances, but with caution." Elias nodded. "I can go. I'm more discreet, and I can hear what's being said." The night wore on, and with it, the urgency of a decision. Ilara felt the diamond's weight, not in her hands, but in her soul. It was a blessing and a curse, a promise of wealth and a death sentence. But there was a new spark in her eyes. It was no longer just about surviving. It was about fighting. Fighting for Elias, for the boys, for a future they could call their own. "We need information," Ilara concluded, her voice low but laden with determination. "We need to know what the church knows, what they're looking for, and then, perhaps, we can use that to our advantage." The chapel, once a place of peace, was now an improvised headquarters, a center of conspiracy. The angel of death rested in its center, a colossal chess piece in a game of life or death. Ilara, the healer, had become a strategist, and the board was set. The first move, she knew, would be the most dangerous. They needed a plan, and they needed it before the morning sun brought not just a new day, but the inevitable arrival of the church. The ticking of the time bomb was getting louder. The next morning brought no clarity, but a chilling urgency that settled in Ilara's and Elias's bones. The sun, which once promised a new day of peace, now seemed a relentless spotlight, about to expose the secret the chapel held. The angel of death, disguised beneath layers of earth and moss, was a silent and colossal presence, a constant reminder of the burden they carried. Leo and Tom still slept, nestled in their makeshift blankets, oblivious to the shadow hanging over their lives. Their innocence was a balm, but also a catalyst. For them, Ilara would fight. For them, she would become the strategist she never imagined herself to be. "Be careful, Ilara," Elias whispered, his voice hoarse with worry as she prepared to leave. He had spent the night sharpening the small dagger, a futile gesture against the church's power, but a symbol of his determination. "Don't delay, and trust no one." Ilara nodded, adjusting her shawl over her shoulders and the small herb pouch she would use as a disguise. "I know. Keep the boys safe. If anything happens, if they come," her voice faltered. "I know what to do," Elias completed, his eyes fixed on hers. "I'll take them to the hiding place in the forest. Don't worry." He hugged her tightly, an embrace that held all the fear and hope they felt. "Come back to us." With a last look at the chapel and the sleeping boys, Ilara emerged into the faint light of dawn. The forest, once her ally, now seemed a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. Every leaf that crunched under her feet, every twig that snapped, sounded like an alarm. She forced herself to maintain a steady pace, the upright posture of a healer on her morning rounds, but her heart beat like a war drum. The journey to the village seemed longer than ever. With each step, Ilara reviewed the plan in her mind. Silas, the old hermit miner, he was their only hope. But how to convince him? How to ask for mining tools for a diamond without revealing the diamond? The lie would need to be convincing, and the story impeccable. As she approached the edge of the forest, the village's murmur began to reach her ears. But it wasn't the usual familiar noise. There was a tension in the air, a strange quietness among the everyday sounds. Ilara hid behind a bush, observing. There were guards, not many, but enough to be noticed. Men in dark robes with the embroidered emblem of the church patrolled the streets, their gazes scrutinizing every corner, every face. They were not there to keep the peace, they were there to find something, or someone. Ilara clutched her shawl, feeling a chill. Valerius was not wasting time. The monk had made the connection, and the church was mobilizing. She needed to be even more cautious. Blending in with the first villagers heading out for their chores, Ilara adopted an expression of serenity, the same she used when visiting a sick person. She greeted some neighbors with a nod, exchanging forced smiles, feeling the curious glances of the guards upon her. They didn't know her well, but her presence in the village was common. Silas's house was on the outskirts of the village, isolated, almost hidden among the rocks and low-lying vegetation. It was a humble, poorly kept cabin, with a faint smoke rising from the chimney. Ilara knocked on the creaking wooden door, her heart in her throat. "Who is it?" A hoarse, suspicious voice echoed from within. "It's Ilara, Silas, the healer. I came to see how you are. I heard your eyes have been getting worse." There was a prolonged silence, and Ilara thought he wouldn't open. Then the door creaked open, revealing an aged man with a long, tangled beard, eyes almost completely veiled by cataracts. He held a wooden staff, more out of habit than necessity, his senses sharpened by the darkness. "Ilara, the healer," he grunted, his wrinkled face in a scowl. "I don't need your remedies. My eyes have been gone for a long time, and the pains, they are old friends." "Even so, Silas," Ilara replied, her voice soft and professional. "Medicine can offer relief, and I have some new herbs that might help with night vision, perhaps. But in truth, I came for another reason, a favor." Silas narrowed his cloudy eyes, a glint of distrust in them. "Favors are expensive, healer, especially from an old man like me." "I know," Ilara said, stepping into the cabin, which smelled of damp earth and smoke. "And I'm willing to pay. I need your expertise, Silas, and perhaps your tools." He sat on a wooden bench, gesturing for her to do the same. "My experience is rusty, and my tools. Well, they haven't seen the sun in years. What does a healer want them for?" "I found something, Silas," Ilara began, choosing her words carefully. "Something rare, a peculiar rock formation deep in the forest. It's not gold nor silver, but it has properties I believe are unique for medicine. It's incredibly hard, and I need someone who knows how to extract a piece without damaging it, with precision." Silas snorted. "Hard stone, you say? And you, a healer, want to mine? That sounds like trouble, Ilara. The church doesn't like people meddling where they shouldn't." "It's not a church place," Ilara hastened to say. "It's on my land, in the crypt I bought. It's a natural formation, hidden, and it's for medicinal purposes, I swear." She knew mentioning the crypt was a risk, but partial truth was the only way to lend credibility to her story. Silas pondered, his gnarled fingers tapping on his staff. "The crypt, you say? The cursed one? Bishop Valerius has been asking about it, about who bought it, and about ancient legends." He looked at Ilara, and for a moment, she felt he could see through her lies, through her soul. "They're talking about a treasure, an angel of light." Ilara's heart leaped, but she maintained her composure. "Legends, Silas. Nonsense. It's just a stone, but a very hard stone, and very important to me. For a new cure. I don't have much money now, but I promise you a share of what I get from this cure. A generous share. And if you can help me extract a piece, or lend me the tools and teach me, I'll be eternally grateful." Silas remained silent for a long time, the air tense between them. Ilara could feel the weight of his decision. He was an old, solitary man, with little to lose, but also little to gain, except perhaps the challenge of a job he loved. "Hard stone, eh?" he finally said, an almost imperceptible glint in his veiled eyes. "I always liked a good challenge, and you, Ilara, have always been an honest woman, despite your strange story. I no longer have the strength I once had for mining, but my hands still know the tools, and I know how rocks sing when they're cut the right way." He stood, swaying slightly. "Not for money, healer, but for the challenge, and for curiosity. Show me this medicinal stone of yours, but if it's trouble, I'm out, and you didn't see me here." Ilara felt immense relief, but also a new fear. Silas was coming. He would see the angel. She was leading a stranger into the heart of her secret, but there was no other choice. "Thank you, Silas," she said, her voice choked. "Thank you. We need to go now. We can't waste time." He picked up an old leather bag where he kept his chisels and hammers, tools that seemed extensions of his own hands. "Let's go then. But if I see an angel of light, Ilara, you'll have a lot to explain to me." Ilara nodded, feeling the weight of the promise and the danger. The first move had been made. Now the game would become even riskier. She guided the old miner out of the cabin, back into the forest, towards the secret the chapel held. The ticking of the time bomb was now a deafening roar, and Bishop Valerius was getting closer and closer. Ilara guided Silas back through the forest, each step a silent prayer, each shadow a potential enemy. The morning sun, which once promised a new beginning, now seemed a spotlight, revealing every movement. Silas, despite his cloudy vision, seemed to sense the change in the air, the imminent danger. His eyes, though almost blind, had an acuity that transcended sight, perceiving the nuances of the terrain, the distant sounds of the village, the tense silence of the forest. "The ravens are restless today, healer," he grumbled, his staff tapping the ground ahead. "They know when death lurks, or greed." Ilara swallowed hard. Greed, yes. The greed of the church, the greed that had consumed Valerius and now threatened to consume them all. She quickened her pace, gently pulling Silas by the arm, her concern about the church guards intensifying with every meter. They couldn't be seen together, not with the crypt and its secret so close. "It's just the wind, Silas," she tried to reassure him, though her own voice betrayed her anxiety. "Come on, we need to get there before the sun is high." The chapel entrance seemed more like a portal to another world than a simple building. The dark wood, the worn stones, everything seemed to conspire to hide the treasure that lay beneath. Elias was waiting, his face marked by a sleepless night. The dagger in his hand, a grim reminder of the approaching battle. His eyes widened when he saw Silas. "He's trustworthy, Elias," Ilara whispered, anticipating the unspoken question. "He's going to help us." Silas, sensing Elias's presence, merely nodded, a grunt of recognition. "Another one for the nest of trouble, eh? I can already smell mischief." They descended the dark stairs of the crypt, the damp, heavy air enveloping them. Leo and Tom, awakened by the noise, watched from the corner, their eyes wide with curiosity and a little fear. The faint light of Elias's lantern danced on the walls, revealing the crypt's dancing shadows, until it finally rested upon the imposing form of the Angel of Death. Silas stopped abruptly. His eyes, though almost blind, seemed to fix on the statue. He fumbled the air with one hand, as if trying to feel the object's presence before seeing it. The silence in the crypt was almost palpable, broken only by Ilara's ragged breath and the faint crackle of the lantern's wood. "Well, Ilara," Silas said, his voice hoarse, almost a whisper, "where is your medicinal stone?" Ilara pointed to the statue. It's that, Silas." The old miner took a hesitant step forward and extended a trembling hand. His gnarled fingers brushed the cold, multifaceted surface of the angel. He ran his hand over the wing, the face, the base, his experienced fingers exploring every curve, every edge, every imperfection. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he were reading a book in Braille. Then he stopped. His fingers froze. A guttural sound escaped his throat, a mixture of awe and disbelief. His eyes, once cloudy, seemed to gain a momentary sparkle, as if the diamond's reflected light had penetrated his darkness. "By the ancient gods," he murmured, his voice choked. This isn't a stone. It's not a rock formation. It's an angel of light. He turned to Ilara, his wrinkled face contorted in an expression she had never seen before, a mixture of anger, awe, and deep fear. You lied to me, healer. This isn't a cure. This is doom. Ilara stepped forward. I know, Silas. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell the truth in the village. But it's a diamond. A raw diamond. The largest ever seen. Silas slowly shook his head, still processing the sight, or the sensation of what lay before him. A diamond. I've heard the legends, the angel of light, the heart of the mountain. They say the church sought it for centuries, that it has the power to blind, to corrupt. And now it's here, in your cursed crypt. He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Bishop Valerius isn't looking for legends, Ilara. He's looking for this, and he won't stop until he finds it. That's why we need you, Silas, Elias intervened, his voice firm. We need to get it out of here, or at least a part of it, before they arrive. Silas touched the diamond again, his fingers gliding over the cold surface. Get this out of here. Do you have any idea what you're asking? This isn't a gold nugget. It's a mountain of light. Every wrong strike can crack it, destroy it. And what will you do with it? Where will you hide it? The whole world will want a piece of this. We have no choice, Silas, Ilara pleaded, her voice laden with despair. If the church finds it here, they will kill us, me, Elias, and the boys. They won't hesitate. Valerius is already in the village with his guards. He knows something is here. He's closing in. The old miner sighed, a heavy sound that echoed in the crypt. He was a man who had spent his entire life dealing with the earth, with rocks, with secrets hidden in the depths. He understood greed, the madness that gold and precious stones could awaken in men. But he also understood the beauty, the challenge, the art of extracting wealth from the earth. I don't have the strength I once had, he said, his voice lower, almost thoughtful. But my hands still know the stone song, and this is the rarest song of all. He turned to Ilara, his veiled eyes fixed on her. You don't have money to pay me for a job like this, and I don't want your diamond, but there's something I've always wanted, a challenge, one last dance with the earth. What do you want, Silas? Ilara asked, hope blossoming in her chest. I want you to help me, he replied, a glint of determination in his eyes. I can't do this alone, and I want you to understand. Understand the stone, understand what it is, and what it can do. It's a job of days, perhaps weeks, and time. Time is against us. He looked at Elias, then at the boys, his eyes lingering on Leo and Tom, who watched the scene in silence. And if Bishop Valerius arrives, well, then we'll have to fight, and I haven't fought in a long time. Ilara felt immense relief mixed with renewed terror. Silas was with them, but the task was monumental and the danger imminent. The ticking of the time bomb was now thunder, and the church, with Valerius at its head, was about to knock on the door. The game had begun, and the stakes were their lives. The relief Ilara felt at Silas's acceptance was a cold breath, quickly replaced by a terror that squeezed her chest. The old miner's words echoed in the dark crypt. It's a job of days, perhaps weeks, and time is against us. And the thunder of the ticking time bomb now seemed an omen, a constant reminder of Bishop Valerius's proximity. Silas, his gnarled fingers still brushing the angel's cold surface, seemed to be in a trance. His eyes, which before barely distinguished shapes, now seemed to see beyond the stone, penetrating its essence. He was not just a miner, he was a reader of rocks, a decipherer of geological secrets. We can't just strike it, he began, his voice stronger now, laden with authority. This isn't granite, it's not marble, it's solidified light. Every facet, every line is a story of millions of years. One wrong blow, and the story crumbles to dust, or worse, into worthless fragments. He stepped back slightly, fumbling with the leather bag containing his tools. We need precision, patience, and knowledge. You need to understand what you're touching. Diamond is the hardest known substance, but also the most fragile at certain cleavage points. It's like a sleeping giant. If we wake it incorrectly, it turns against us. Ilara and Elias exchanged glances, the magnitude of the task imposing itself upon them. The boys, Leo and Tom, were huddled in the corner, watching the scene with wide eyes, absorbing every word, every movement. "First, we need light," Silas instructed, pointing to Elias's lantern. "Not that dim light. We need to see the veins, the imperfections, the lines of force. We need more lanterns and dark cloths to cover the walls so the light doesn't scatter and blind us." Elias nodded and immediately began to search the crypt for anything that might serve. He found some pieces of old dusty fabric, remnants of forgotten shrouds, and carefully hung them, creating a contrast that would help focus the light. Ilara, in turn, lit another small oil lamp she had brought, placing it at a strategic point to illuminate the angel's base. Silas knelt with difficulty and began to take his chisels from the bag. They were not common tools. They were works of art, polished by use, sharpened with almost religious care. He chose a fine chisel with a point that resembled a needle and a small rounded hammer. "The diamond has a soul," he murmured almost to himself, as he ran his fingers over the angel's surface. "It sings. We just need to find the right note, the point of resonance." He began to tap gently at different points on the diamond's base, with the chisel and hammer producing small metallic sounds that echoed in the crypt. His ears, though old, seemed to catch nuances that others could not. He was looking for a sound, a vibration that indicated a natural cleavage point, a place where the stone could be broken without being destroyed. "We need a small piece," Ilara reminded, her voice low, "just enough for the cure, and to prove what we have." Silas shook his head. "A small piece is the hardest. It's like trying to pull a hair from a lion's head without waking it. We need a fulcrum, a cutting line that respects the structure, and that takes time." Suddenly Elias, who was near the crypt entrance, raised his head. His eyes widened. "I heard something," he whispered, the dagger in his hand trembling slightly. "Footsteps, many footsteps, and voices, near the chapel." Ilara's heart leaped, beating erratically against her ribs. Time had run out. The time bomb was no longer just ticking. It was about to explode. Silas stopped his movements, his veiled eyes fixing on Elias. "Valerius," he said without questioning. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. "He's here." A tense silence hung in the crypt. The boys shrank back even further, their faces pale. Ilara felt a knot in her throat. They had failed. The diamond would be theirs, and their lives lost. "We can't stop now," Ilara said, her voice choked but with new determination. "Silas, we have to try, even if it's a tiny piece. We need something to fight with, to negotiate, or to escape." Silas looked at the angel, then at Ilara, and finally at Elias. A deep wrinkle formed on his forehead. "Fight, you said? I haven't fought in a long time. But if it's to defend the earth's beauty and the lives of innocents, then so be it." He leaned over the diamond again, his agile fingers choosing a slightly more robust chisel. "Elias, you'll stay at the entrance. If they come in, you buy us time. Ilara, you'll help me. I need steady hands to hold the tool. And you boys," he said, looking at Leo and Tom, "stay quiet. And pray. Pray this old man still has one last trick up his sleeve." The sound of footsteps outside became more distinct, accompanied by muffled voices and the creak of a door. The chapel door. They were inside. Silas raised the hammer, his eyes fixed on the spot he had chosen. He was no longer looking for the stone's song. He was about to force it to sing. "Prepare yourselves," he said, his voice hoarse, "for the last dance." And with a precise blow, stronger than anyone expected from his aged hands, the chisel struck the diamond. A sharp sound, almost a lament, echoed in the crypt, and a small crack, thin as a hair, began to form at the base of the Angel of Light. Outside, footsteps approached the crypt stairs. The game was not just beginning, it was at its climax. The sharp lament of the diamond echoed in the crypt, a sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of silence. It was not the dry snap of a rock being split, but a deep, almost organic moan, as if the ancient stone were alive and felt the cold blade of the chisel in its flesh. The crack, thin as a silver hair, snaked across the base of the Angel of Light, an almost invisible trace. But for Silas it was a map, a promise. It was the first step, but time, that relentless enemy, did not wait. The creak of the chapel door, previously muffled, became a dry thud, and then the unmistakable sound of heavy boots descending the stone steps of the crypt. Each step was a hammer blow to Ilara's chest, an echo of Silas's strike, but with a much darker intent. A strong, yellowish light burst through the stairwell opening, tearing through the crypt's gloom. The imposing figure of Bishop Valerius emerged, his silhouette projected against the light, like a herald of condemnation. He was not alone. 2 robust guards, in leather armor and sheathed axes, flanked him, their eyes sweeping the surroundings with brutal efficiency. Valerius's gaze fell upon the scene. Silas, kneeling before the angel, the chisel still in his hand, the small crack visible even at that distance. Ilara and Elias, pale, with the boys huddled behind them, and, in the center of it all, the diamond, now revealed in all its raw and terrifying glory. A hiss of pure fury escaped the bishop's lips. His eyes, once shrewd, now gleamed with a dangerous mix of greed and rage. He had been deceived, outwitted by an old healer and a decrepit miner, and the treasure the church had sought for centuries, the heart of the mountain, was there, and it had been touched. What is the meaning of this? Valerius's voice was thunder in the crypt, making the boys shrink back even further. What are you doing with church property, with the angel of death? He approached, his footsteps echoing, each one a threat. His eyes fixed on the crack, and a tremor of indignation ran through his body. You damaged it! Silas, surprisingly, did not flinch. His veiled eyes, now filled with iron determination, met the bishop's. "Damage?" he retorted, his voice hoarse but firm. "I am freeing it, Bishop. Freeing it from your ignorance, from your greed. This stone is not an idol to be worshipped or a treasure to be hidden. It is a wonder of creation, and you left it to rot in darkness." Ilara stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of Silas, shielding him with her fragile body. "We didn't know what it was, Bishop," she said, her voice trembling but trying to sound convincing. "It was just a dirty statue. Silas was. He was just trying to clean it." Valerius laughed, a dry, disdainful sound. "Clean? With a chisel and a hammer? Don't take me for a fool, old woman. I know what this is, and I know what you intend. To steal what is rightfully the church's, what is rightfully mine." His eyes flashed, and he gestured to the guards. "Seize them, and get that old man away from the angel, carefully, so as not to damage it further." Elias, the dagger still trembling in his hand, stepped forward, blocking the guard's path. "Don't come any closer," he growled, his voice surprisingly strong. "We're not going anywhere, and no one will touch Ilara or the boys." The guards hesitated, assessing the threat of a desperate man. Valerius, however, was more interested in the diamond. He approached the angel's base, his eyes scanning the surface, the crack. He reached out a hand, as if to touch it, but stopped, fearing the legend of blindness and corruption. "Silas," Ilara whispered, her voice urgent, "what do we do?" The old miner did not answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the point where the crack had begun, and he seemed to be measuring, calculating. The pressure was immense, but there was a strange calm in his movements. He knew every second was precious, that every blow now was a gamble of life or death. "Bishop," Silas finally said, raising his voice, "you want the whole angel, don't you? Immaculate, perfect, but I've already started. And if I continue, if I strike in the wrong place, this mountain of light could shatter into 1,000 worthless pieces. Do you want to risk that?" Valerius stopped, his hand still suspended in the air. The threat was real. He had seen the crack. He knew the diamond was hard, but also fragile at its cleavage points. Greed competed with the fear of destruction. "What do you propose, old man?" Valerius asked, his voice tense, but with a touch of caution. "I propose a deal," Silas replied, his eyes fixed on the bishops. "We stop, you let us go, and the angel stays here untouched until you find someone with the knowledge and patience to deal with it. Or, I continue, and what was an invaluable treasure becomes a pile of glittering gravel." A heavy silence fell over the crypt. Silas's proposal was audacious, a dangerous bluff. Valerius pondered, his eyes alternating between the diamond and the old miner. He wanted the angel, but he wanted it perfect. The idea of losing it, of seeing it destroyed, was unbearable. "You wouldn't dare," Valerius hissed, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "I would dare," Silas retorted, raising the chisel again, his aged hand firm. "To protect the earth's beauty from men's greed, I would dare anything. And you, Bishop, would you dare to lose what the Church sought for centuries because of your impatience?" Bishop Valerius clenched his fists, the fury on his face almost disfiguring him. He was cornered, but he was not a man to yield. He was a man of power, of manipulation. "Very well," Valerius said, his voice low and dangerous. "A deal, but not on the terms of an old miner and a healer. On my terms. You stop, and I take the angel, whole, and you come with us, to ensure there will be no more damage to this wonder of creation." He smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "You will be my guests, in the Church's prison." Ilara felt her blood run cold in her veins. It wasn't a deal. It was a trap. They would be taken, and the diamond stolen, and surely their lives would be taken afterward. "No," Elias shouted, stepping forward, but the guards moved, blocking him. Silas, however, did not look away from the diamond. He seemed to have made a decision. "You want the whole angel, Bishop?" he asked, his voice now almost a whisper, but laden with a new and terrible determination. "Then you won't have it." And before Valerius could react, before the guards could move, Silas raised the hammer again. This time, the blow was not a precise tap, but a heavy strike, calculated to hit a critical cleavage point. The sound was a dry crack, followed by a thud. The crack at the angel's base widened, and a part of the stone, not a hair's breadth, but a considerable piece, broke free, falling to the crypt floor with an intense gleam. The fragment rolled, emitting a dazzling light that blinded everyone for an instant, like a small sun that had just been born in the darkness. Valerius let out a scream of horror and fury, his eyes wide, his hands outstretched in despair towards the now mutilated angel. "No, what have you done, you old fool?" But Silas did not answer. He was panting, exhausted, but his eyes gleamed with grim satisfaction. The piece of diamond on the floor radiated a pure, almost magical light. "I did what was necessary," Silas said, his voice hoarse. "Now, Bishop, you have a problem, and we have a chance." The game had changed. The stakes were even higher, and the light of the diamond fragment on the crypt floor was a beacon of hope and danger, illuminating the path to an uncertain future. Bishop Valerius's scream tore through the crypt's air, a guttural sound of horror and fury that made the stone walls tremble. His eyes, once shrewd, were now wide, fixed on the mutilated angel of light and on the diamond fragment that rolled on the floor, radiating a dazzling light. It was as if a piece of the sun had been torn from the sky and cast into the darkness, burning the retina of all present. "No! What have you done, you old fool?" Valerius's voice was thunder, but there was a note of genuine despair in it. The treasure of centuries, the heart of the mountain, was now imperfect, damaged. The vision of his greed, of his power, shattered like the stone. The guards, previously hesitant, now moved with brutal urgency. The implicit order was clear: stop the old man, whatever the cost. But the intense brilliance of the fragment on the floor, dancing and refracting light into 1,000 colors, caused momentary disorientation. They blinked, trying to adjust their vision, and it was in that instant of hesitation that Silas's chance began to manifest. Silas, panting and exhausted, but with a grim gleam in his eyes, did not look away from the bishop. "I did what was necessary," he repeated, his voice hoarse but firm, "to protect what is truly valuable. Now, Bishop, you have a problem, and we have a chance." Ilara, paralyzed for a second by the shock of the blow and the blinding light, felt the meaning of Silas's words percolate in her mind. The angel was damaged, yes, but not destroyed, and that fragment, it was a distraction, a focal point. With a sudden instinct, she bent down, ignoring the brilliance that hurt her eyes, and picked up the piece of diamond. It was heavy, cold, but radiated a strange, pulsating warmth in her hand. The light emanating from it was so strong it illuminated her face, revealing a mixture of fear and a new, faint hope. "Seize them! Seize them all!" Valerius roared, pointing at Silas, then at Ilara. His face was contorted into a mask of hatred. "And don't touch the angel anymore, just seize them!" The guards advanced. The first, a corpulent man with a sheathed axe, aimed for Silas. But Elias, the dagger still trembling in his hand, did not hesitate. With a roar that seemed to come from a deep place within him, he lunged forward, intercepting the guard. The dagger, though small, was sharp, and Elias's fury was a force to be reckoned with. He was not a warrior, but he was a father, a husband, and he was desperate. The guard recoiled, surprised by the unexpected ferocity. The second guard, seeing the scene, veered towards Ilara. But the old healer, with the diamond fragment in her hands, was not as defenseless as she seemed. The diamond's light was more than a visual distraction. It seemed to possess an energy of its own. As the guard approached, she instinctively raised the fragment. The concentrated light struck the guard's eyes, who let out a cry of pain and brought his hands to his face, stumbling backward. It was as if the diamond had fired a sunbeam, a flash of pure intensity. The boys, previously huddled, now watched the scene with wide eyes. Fear was still there, but there was also a spark of admiration for the courage of their parents and old Silas. Valerius, seeing his guards stumble, one with his hands over his eyes, the other in a standoff with Elias, let out another roar of frustration. He had underestimated the old woman, the miner, and the simple man. He had underestimated the power of desperation. "Silas, what do we do?" Ilara whispered, her voice choked, the fragment still pulsing in her hands. She felt a strange warmth, almost a vibration, coming from the stone. The old miner with a last effort rose, leaning on his chisel like a staff. His eyes swept the crypt, looking for an exit, a plan. The crack in the angel of light was now an open wound, a testament to his audacity. But the light of the fragment in Ilara's hands was a promise. "The bishop wants the angel," Silas said, his voice low but laden with new cunning. "But he can't have it if he can't move it, and he can't stop us if he can't see us." He pointed to the angel, to the crack. The blow wasn't just to damage, it was to weaken, to create a point of instability. This stone, it has a song, and I forced it to sing a melody of discord. Valerius, recovering from the shock, perceived the new threat. The angel, even damaged, was still immense, and if Silas had weakened its structure, moving it would be a Herculean task, risking its complete destruction. The bishop's greed was now in direct conflict with the fear of total loss. "You're not going anywhere," Valerius growled, pulling a small, ornate dagger from his own robe, a gesture more symbolic than threatening, but one that revealed his complete loss of control. "This treasure is mine, and you will pay for this." But the game had already changed. The light of the fragment in Ilara's hands was not just a distraction, it was a beacon that perhaps could attract outside attention, or that could be used to illuminate an escape path they hadn't yet seen. The bishop had focused too much on the whole, without realizing that a small piece, torn off with intent, could change everything. The crypt, once a tomb, was now a stage for a battle of wills, illuminated by the light of a diamond that refused to be merely a possession. Escape, once unthinkable, now seemed a tenuous possibility, shining as intensely as the fragment in Ilara's hand. Darkness swallowed them. It was not the familiar darkness of the crypt, but a dense, damp blackness, heavy as a shroud of earth. Ilara, the diamond fragment still pulsing in her hands, was the first to plunge into the narrow passage, the stone's light flickering like a heart beating in the abyss. The warmth radiating from the diamond was not just physical, it was a promise, a flame against the cold of the unknown. Behind her, Elias pushed the boys, one in each arm, his breath ragged, but his eyes fixed on the flickering light. The older boy, with the forced courage of a child watching his world crumble, held his younger brother's hand, who whimpered softly. Silas, the old miner, came last, the chisel still in hand, using it to support himself and to push away loose stones that threatened to close the path behind them. The sound of the crypt collapsing echoed behind them, a deep, prolonged groan that made the tunnel vibrate. Dust and small stones fell from the ceiling, and the air grew thick with the smell of wet earth and mold. With each step, Ilara felt the ground beneath her feet unstable, as if the earth itself was writhing in agony. The diamond fragment in her hands not only illuminated, it seemed to guide, the light concentrating on specific points of the passage, revealing footholds, warning of dangers. "Careful! The rock is unstable." Silas coughed, his voice hoarse, but his mind still sharp. "This tunnel, it's not natural. It's a vein, a fissure the earth opened long ago. The angel, it awakened it again." The passage was a labyrinth of tight turns and steep descents. Ilara used the fragment to light the way, the light dancing on the damp walls, revealing tree roots that infiltrated the rock, forming an intricate web. They crawled, they slipped, with every movement feeling the urgency of escape. Elias kept the boys close, a human shield against the falling stones and the oppressive darkness. "Mom, where are we going?" the older boy whispered, his voice trembling, but curiosity overcoming fear for an instant. "To freedom, my child," Ilara replied, her voice firmer than she felt. She didn't know where the passage led, but the diamond in her hand seemed to have a purpose, a direction. She felt a strange connection with the stone, as if it were an extension of her own will, or perhaps as if the stone were whispering ancient secrets into her mind. Meanwhile, in the crypt that now groaned and crumbled, Bishop Valerius watched the opening in the wall with impotent fury. The angel of light, cracked and now covered in dust and debris, seemed to mock him. His guards, one still rubbing his eyes, the other stunned by Elias's shove, were as lost as he was. "They can't have gone far." Valerius growled, his face contorted. "This crypt, it's collapsing. They'll be crushed, or the diamond will be, and all will be lost." The bishop's greed now mingled with a chilling panic. It wasn't just the treasure he feared losing, but the very structure of the church, the legend he had promised to revive. If the angel were destroyed, his ascent would be a humiliating failure. He could not allow it. "Follow us, now," he ordered, pushing one of the guards towards the passage. "Find them, bring the fragment, and the old woman. Bring her back. She knows too much." But the guard hesitated, looking at the unstable darkness of the passage and the ceiling that continued to collapse. The fear of being buried alive was stronger than loyalty to the bishop. "My lord, it's too dangerous. The crypt is giving way." Valerius, in a fit of rage, drew his dagger and pointed it at the guard's throat. "You defy me? Go, or I'll bury you here myself." The guard, with a sigh of resignation, cautiously advanced into the passage, the faint light of a makeshift torch barely penetrating the darkness. The other guard, still with blurred vision, remained behind, protecting the bishop, but with his gaze fixed on the crevice. Inside the tunnel, Ilara felt a cold pang, a premonition. The diamond fragment seemed to vibrate more intensely, like a warning. "They're coming after us," she whispered to Silas. "I know," the old man replied, his voice a little stronger now, as if the earth's proximity invigorated him. "But this passage, it has its own tricks. The earth doesn't like to be disturbed, and the angel, it's singing louder now." They continued to descend, the passage becoming steeper and more slippery. The smell of earth and minerals intensified, and a distant sound of running water began to be audible. Ilara felt a current of fresh air, a sign that the passage might be opening up somewhere. Suddenly, the passage widened slightly, revealing a small, natural chamber. In the center, there was a pool of crystal-clear water, fed by a drip from the ceiling. The light of the diamond fragment, reflected in the water, created a kaleidoscope of colors on the walls. "An underground spring," Silas murmured, his eyes gleaming. "The earth offers us a gift. Drink, Ilara, drink, Elias, and the boys. It's pure, blessed water." As they hurried to drink, the sound of muffled footsteps and voices echoed behind them. The guards were approaching. "We don't have time to rest," Elias said, his voice tense. "We need to keep going." But Ilara, with the diamond fragment, noticed something more. The light of the stone upon touching the water not only reflected, it seemed to merge, creating an ethereal glow that rose from the surface. And on the chamber walls where water trickled, there were ancient drawings, symbols engraved in the rock, almost erased by time. Symbols that Ilara, as a healer and connoisseur of legends, recognized. They were marks of an ancient people, a people who worshipped the earth and its riches, a people who, according to legends, had hidden their greatest treasures in the depths. "Silas, look!" Ilara pointed to the symbols, her voice full of a new discovery. "This isn't just a passage, it's a path, an ancient path. And this water, it's more than a spring." The old miner approached, his eyes scanning the drawings. A slow, cunning smile formed on his lips. "Ah, Ilara, it seems the earth has more secrets to tell us than the bishop ever dreamed. This isn't an escape, it's a revelation." The sound of the guards approaching grew louder, the echo of their voices and footsteps reverberating through the narrow tunnel. The trembling light of a torch appeared around the bend, and the distorted shadow of a man was cast on the chamber wall. Time was running out. "They're here!" Elias hissed, pulling the boys closer, fear and determination battling on his face. Ilara did not hesitate. She plunged the diamond fragment into the water. Instantly, the entire pool erupted in a dazzling brilliance, a light that did not burn, but filled the chamber with a vibrant, pulsating energy. The symbols on the walls lit up, as if made of liquid fire, and a low, almost inaudible hum began to echo, coming from the earth's depths. "The water, it's singing," the older boy whispered, his eyes wide with wonder, fear momentarily forgotten. The diamond's light, amplified by the water and the ancient symbols, was not just a beacon, it was a force. It expanded, forming an invisible barrier at the chamber's entrance. The guard venturing into the passage recoiled, his torch falling from his hands, his face contorted in pain and confusion. The light seemed to burn his eyes, not with heat, but with an intensity his mind could not process. "What is that?" Bishop Valerius shouted from behind, his voice filled with panic and fury. He had followed his guards, greed propelling him, but the sight of the light made him stop. "The diamond, it's alive!" Ilara felt the connection deepen. The water was not just a spring, it was a conductor. The symbols were not just drawings, they were a circuit. And the diamond was not just a stone. It was a pulsating heart of the earth itself. She raised the wet fragment, and the light concentrated, not to destroy, but to protect. "The earth will not be profaned." Ilara's voice resonated, no longer the voice of an old healer, but of someone invested with an ancestral power. "The angel of light is not a treasure to be stolen, Bishop. It is a guardian, and it has chosen its path." With a movement of her hands, Ilara directed the light. She did not attack the guards, but sealed the path. The rock at the chamber's entrance began to vibrate violently, and the tree roots infiltrating the walls writhed, thickening, intertwining like petrified snakes. With a deep groan, the passage behind them collapsed, sealing them in the chamber and cutting off the pursuit. The sound of the collapse echoed, muffled but final. Bishop Valerius roared in despair and rage. He had lost. The angel of light, the treasure he coveted, was now sealed in the earth's depths, and the fragment, the key to its power, was in the old healer's hands. The crypt, his crypt, was collapsing, burying not only the great diamond, but also his dreams of glory and wealth. He found himself alone in the darkness and dust, his guards stunned and useless, his plans in ruins. In the chamber, the earth's hum subsided, and the diamond's light calmed, still bright but softer. The family was safe for now, but where would they go now? The symbols on the walls, now clearer, pointed to a new passage, a hidden crevice behind the pool of water. "This is the way," Silas said, pointing, "a path that only reveals itself to those the earth accepts. It's an exit, Ilara, to a place where the angel's light can shine freely." Ilara felt the truth in his words. The passage opened into a gentle descent, and the sound of running water grew stronger, mingling with the distant birdsong. They had found not only an escape, but a new life. They descended, the diamond fragment's light guiding them through a tunnel that grew wider and less claustrophobic. The air became fresher, the smell of damp earth replaced by the scent of leaves and flowers. Finally, with a last step, they emerged. It was not a dark cave, nor a dense forest. It was a hidden valley, a natural amphitheater of stunning beauty, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Waterfalls cascaded into crystal-clear pools, towering trees reached towards the sky, and the air was filled with birdsong and the murmur of nature. It was an untouched paradise, a secret of the earth, guarded for centuries. Ilara looked at the diamond fragment in her hands. It pulsed with a calm, constant light, like a heart that had found its home. It was no longer just a precious stone. It was the essence of the angel of light, a piece of the star that had fallen to earth, now free to illuminate. Elias and the boys looked around, their faces illuminated by a mixture of awe and relief. Freedom had a face, and it was the face of this valley. Silas, the old miner, smiled, a smile of one who had seen the earth's magic manifest. In that valley, far from the greed and darkness of the outside world, Ilara and her family found their refuge. She would use the diamond fragment not to accumulate riches, but to heal, to guide, to protect, as the earth had done for them. The legend of the Angel of Light would no longer be a story of a hidden treasure, but of a light that guided the lost. a secret whispered among the trees and waters, guarded by a healer and her family who had found true wealth, freedom, and the promise of a new beginning. And so the old widow, who had spent everything to buy a crypt, found not just a diamond, but a destiny. She became the guardian of an ancestral light, the voice of the earth, and the hope of a future where greed could not reach pure hearts. Bishop Valerius, in turn, was found days later buried in the collapsed crypt, his dreams of power and wealth crushed beneath the rocks he so coveted. The angel of light, the great diamond, remained in the depths, a secret of the earth, but its spirit lived on in the small fragment Elara carried, an eternal beacon of hope and light.